I think Labour had a great record in government up until the banking crisis, which blew us out of the water economically and politically. I mean, you think of an area like Neath. When I first came here 21 years ago, there was mass unemployment still. I remember I used to joke that you could knock on people's doors during the daytime if you were canvassing, campaigning on behalf of the Labour Party, and a lot of people would be in. Then I started complaining when we got into government, and well into government, because everybody was at work and you couldn't reach anybody during the day. It's the fault of that Labour government. Now it's starting to turn back a bit because unemployment is returning. And so I think we did great things. We built new hospitals, we built new schools, the economy was booming, there were more jobs in Neath than ever before. They might not have been the same jobs that of their parents' generation, but there were more jobs than had ever been the case in Wales. So I think we deserve a lot of credit for that. The banking crisis blew us out of the water. However, there is another point that I think is valid in terms of a criticism of us and our record. We haven't yet, although the Welsh government is constantly, under Labour, constantly striving to do this, we haven't yet created as strong and resilient a private sector business base as we need in Wales. And that is the unfinished business, frankly, of any government in Wales, but certainly of a Labour-led government, or a Labour government as we have at the present time under Carwyn Jones, is to support business growth and entrepreneurialism. And then you come back to Neath. I mean, one of the frustrating things about the current situation for me as an MP is I had a couple come to me at my surgery. Fantastic couple, started up their own business. He's a builder, she's more into the kind of planning, delivering side of things. They managed to acquire some properties, they converted them, they sold them off for rent. They built more properties. They've got tenants in them, and they've got a mortgage from the bank. The bank suddenly wants to foreclose on them. They're paying their loan back, they're thriving, they're making a profit, they're starting to pay the mortgage down, and the bank says no, because some box has been ticked higher up the banking ladder somewhere in London probably, and suddenly they've got to foreclose on a 450,000 mortgage, which will kill the business and destroy all that they've worked to achieve. Now, that is what we've got to sort out, that the banks start serving the people, that we start having bank managers in towns like Neath that know the local businesses, build a relationship with them, instead of which local businesses go along and they have to tick a series of boxes on a computer, and then some decision is made remotely up the banking chain. I'm frustrated about it because I see really energetic, hard-working people just not being supported in the way that they would have been had they been doing this kind of business in 10, 20 years ago. I think devolved government in Wales has been really good for Wales and good for Neath, but it hasn't been perfect. And that's to be seen now, for example, in the way that the Welsh Labour government is driving up standards in all schools, picking up the template that we have in Neath Port Talbot, which came over the course of the last 15 years or so from one of the bottom of the 22 county education authorities to the top performing one, in an area which is low income, which has got high levels of deprivation, normally associated with low education standards. We've shown that actually you can drive up standards, that every child can have a future and can achieve high qualifications. It doesn't matter if you, although it's more difficult if you're from a low income, difficult family background, you do not write children off and say, well, they're not going to make it to Oxford or Cambridge or to become the best plumber or electrician or boilermaker. You give everybody a chance, and more of that needs to be done. We need to do more in health. We are doing more. I think at the beginning of devolution there was perhaps more of a comfort zone, that we were doing things in a more comfortable way in Wales, that everybody in health and education, the teachers, the nurses and so on, supported. But actually we were not achieving the standards we needed to. And so we still want to take people with us, but we want to drive up those standards, and I think that's crucial. But I'm really proud myself of when I look at the Welsh Assembly and I look at the extra powers that it's now gained from the referendum won in the second referendum. I'm proud of that because I delivered as Secretary of State, as Neath MP, the 2006 Act, Government of Wales Act, which provided for these powers. And most people would agree, this may sound immodest, that probably anybody else likely to have been Secretary of State at that time, in the middle part of the decade, 2005-6, when this legislation went through, there's probably not anybody else who would have delivered that. So that's something I feel proud of. It's a real achievement. And when I see the Assembly developing, I don't always agree with it, doesn't always agree with me. That's not important. What's important is that Wales is governing itself more and more, and then has to stand on its own 2 feet. You can't blame London for education performance in Wales. It's our own responsibility. I'd mark the Labour government highly, not just because it's my government and my friends and people that I admire in it, the ministers and others, but because I think we've done great things. The challenge that is now before Carwyn Jones and his ministers is very different, however, from that faced by Rhodri Morgan. For most of Rhodri's leadership of Wales, we had a rising budget under Labour. We had a booming economy. And the very reverse is now the case. And in a way, I think the Assembly had got too used to the budget being increased every year, that perhaps there was not a sufficient focus as there should have been on delivery and on efficiency, which there now necessarily is, and not before time. So I think we've achieved a great deal, but nobody's complacent about it, and you've always got to do better. Well, I think the Scottish Nationalist success has had a lot to do with a very charismatic and able leader in Alex Salmond, and for big problems and failures in Scottish Labour. So I think that's a particular set of circumstances which, happily, from my point of view as a Labour politician, doesn't apply in Wales. But there's always been a greater enthusiasm for nationalism and independence in Scotland than there has in Wales. That's historically true. And so I don't see a rising tide of nationalism in Wales in the same way at all. In fact, the very reverse. I think Welsh Labour has occupied the territory that the nationalists sought to occupy, which is a more powerful form of Welsh government, so we can make our own decisions. That's Labour's achievement and Labour's territory. And there's not anywhere else for Plaid Cymru to go except down the independence road, which most people in Wales, the great majority of Wales, don't want. So I think they've got a big problem. In another respect, Wales is different. Scotland is much richer. It's less integrated than Wales is to the English economy. And therefore you can talk about independence, though I still in the end doubt that that's what they will do. Or the second option, what they call devolution max, tax raising powers and, if you like, a much more separate economy. You can talk of that more realistically in Scotland than you can in Wales. In Wales, for example, the taxes, the revenue we raise in taxes we pay is under half what we receive from the Westminster government in all sorts of forms. The Welsh budget, pension payments, defence spending, and so on. It's under half what we receive. So it makes absolutely no sense at all for us to go down this road of all tax-raising powers being sort of locked off and offloaded onto Wales. But having said that, and this is why the Silk Commission is quite interesting and why I support it, there could be, we might have responsibility for some tax varying powers, like stamp duty, landfill tax, aggregates tax, that's for quarries and things, as well as extra borrowing, which we don't have the ability to do in the same way that Scotland and Northern Ireland have. We should be having that, and I support the Welsh Government in its demand for that. But let's tread very carefully in this, along this road, because I think there is a right-wing agenda in England, to be found in some quarters in the Westminster government, that would say, well, why don't we just offload Wales? Because it costs us a lot. And so it should. we're part of Britain, in which the principles of fairness and justice and equality should be paramount, I believe. And we should be supported by the southeast of England, just like the northeast of England is supported by the southeast. It's not like Wales alone is being supported by richer parts of Britain. It's true of other less advantaged parts of Britain, like Wales, in the English regions. So I just would put up a very wary kind of a sort of caution about tumbling down this road and then finding that you've actually been sold a pup.